There has been a huge influx of Chinese electric SUVs in Australia over the last 12 months in particular, but MG was the first with the ZS EV back in late 2020. Now, that car at the time had a very quaint 262 kilometres of range, and even though they said it was tested in Australia, all they meant was that they drove it here before they launched it, and its suspension tune was terrible, completely unsuited to our market, and it remained as such over the lifespan of that car. A new nose job and bigger batteries was pretty much all it got. So here we have its replacement, the MG S5 EV, which thankfully shares absolutely nothing with its predecessor. It's as good as the ZS EV was, terrible and unbuyable. So we're here to find out why the new MG S5 EV is so good, why the ZS EV should never be thought about ever again, and why you should really consider this MG EV if you're in the market for a small rear-wheel drive electric wagon. I'm Nathan Ponchard, and this is Chasing Cars.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
So, what sets the S5 apart from its predecessor is that this car is based on a dedicated EV platform. It is not an electric version of an existing combustion engine car. Underneath the S5 is the modular scalable platform that it shares with the MG4 and the Cyberster actually, but in this case it is pure MG4. Rear-wheel drive, same battery sizes, though the 49 and 62 that MG calls in here are both the usable sizes, not the gross size that they claim for the MG4. So it's slightly confusing, but it is the same. It has an almost identical wheelbase, 25 millimeters longer, not very much. But what sets this apart is really just the whole concept of it. It is a rear-wheel drive small wagon. If you look at the dimensions of the MG S5, it's 44.76 millimeters long. It rides on a 27.30 millimeter wheelbase, and that kind of seems very much like an E46 3 Series Touring or even a W204 C-Class estate. We haven't seen this type of vehicle in Australia since those premium German wagons died 15, 20 years ago. So this in itself is something that deserves to be celebrated, and we shall find out what it's like to drive shortly. Let's get inside. While the outside of the S5 EV is quietly handsome, and it is offered in 7 colours, which is more than some of its competitors, and some of them are really quite nice, it's getting inside the cabin that really is the surprise and delight. The surprise being that it's actually really nice, and the delight being is that the textures and the finishes used are really quite lovely. This is so much better than MGs of the past, including the MG4 and including the HS. Now that mid-sized HS is very superficial in its luxury, essentially hard plastics with a bit of vinyl chucked over the top. This is not that. It does have a lot of these sort of things, like it does have vinyl here, but it's all the way through the doors, stitched through the middle here and padded, stitched around the proper grabs on the doors, on all of these doors. You can fit a whole entire large bottle in the door, which is kind of unusual for an MG. On the dashboard, we have multi-levels of stuff. We've got a grey squidgy bit on top, grey vinyl through here, mock carbon fibre through here, which looks really nice. All of this section around the centre here where the wireless charging is, in this essence, is like kind of fluffy suede, which is beautiful. It has a full tray underneath instead of just kind of really not so usable storage in the MG4. We do still have the dial for the transmission, but you kind of get used to the fact that you can't do a start and stop. You have to lock it to turn it on and off and to put it into drive to start it with your foot on the brake. But you get used to that too. In the center here, these are some of the big changes, as that the full heating and ventilation is all here in all the controls. Everything is really quite easy to use once you work out what does what. The volume control is even on the right-hand side for right-hand drive, although the blinkers are also on the left-hand side, so they haven't done that part. But this is so much more ergonomic than before. And finally, we get to the 12.8-inch screen. This is at least 2 generations better than the one in the MG4. It is fast, it is efficient, it flicks through stuff really quickly. It is really easy to connect your phone with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And I think the greatest part about it is that when you go into MG Pilot in the car, the first thing you see here is MG Pilot Custom. And that, when it says what it says, it allows you to save and quickly apply personalized settings for the safety assist. So I just got in it this morning. I turned off the stuff that I didn't want, and I think that it's still like that. So I've got speed limit recognition off, I've got audible warning off, I have lane change assist off because I don't need that. I don't have driver fatigue monitoring because I know I'm tired, and I don't have driver distraction monitoring either because I will be playing around with the screen, and all of that is saved in just one press, and it remembers it. So when you get back in the car and just lightly push that again, you don't have to do any more button pressing. Considering this is an MG, we've really complained about their active safety. That's a huge step forward. That said, a lot of the other stuff here is really easy to select and choose the intensity of, and it isn't really that annoying. Now, as for the rest of it, the seat comfort is really good. This Essence here gets a 6-way electric driver's seat. It doesn't get electric for the front passenger seat, and nor does it get height adjustment. But we have really nice contouring. We have multi-trims, like multi-colours here. We've got dark grey on the outside, light grey in the middle, cloth in a top-spec model, although we do have sort of slightly patterned perforated vinyl right up the bit where your butt crack is. So that may still cause a bit of sweating in summer. There's no seat ventilation, only heating in this Essence. But that's a really big step forward. We don't have that clammy, cheap petrochemical vinyl that has permeated all of these cheap Chinese EVs. The basic site has full cloth seats. So perhaps someone is listening, probably not to me, but I'm glad they're listening to somebody to know that warmth and texture is what says expense in a car. And this S5 absolutely really does feel quite expensive. You would never know it was an MG unless you looked at this kind of really lovely flat top and bottom 3-spoke wheel, again out of the MG4, which is great to hold, more markings on it so you know what things do, really nice and light, matches great with the steering, which we shall discover shortly. All of that works really, really well. And finally, in the Essence spec, you do get a full panoramic glass roof, but unlike a lot of the medium SUVs, this one actually includes an opening sunroof that's this big, and it has an electric blind that covers it as well. It isn't completely blacked out, but it's close, and that is another big step forward for MG. In the back of the S5, again, surprisingly comfortable. The cushion is really deep and actually really good for under thigh support. I can sit here with my knees directly to the front and have plenty of support here. I'm sitting behind myself here, decent amount of knee room. You can drop the driver's seat all the way to the bottom, but you can't adjust the passengers. So there is a degree of discrepancy between the two. I've got my feet tucked under the driver's seat here. There's enough toe room. It's not too bad. A little bit more there. Obviously, fully flat floor. We've got air vents in the center, but no temperature control. We do have one USB-C and a fight over, although there are two more and a 12-volt outlet under the armrest in the front seat. We've got map pockets here. We've got really good vision forward and to the side, and amped in this Essence by having this opening glass sunroof. The headroom is a little bit compromised. I'm 5'10" here, got that much amount of space, about 177 centimeters, but whatever. You can sort of kind of squeeze the coconut water into the door at an angle, but it does fully fit. We don't have the full grabs of the front doors, but we've still got something to hold on to here. Similar level of quality, padded vinyl in the door there. Another two-tone bit here, although that's not padded like in the front. You can get another interior option that's called white, but it's not really white. It's sort of more of an off ivory color that lightens the armrests and the seats and the dash inserts. And is, again, really quite nice and tasteful. It's not that fluorescent white that you could get in a Model Y, for example. In the center here, we've got fold-down armrests, the pair of cup holders. The backrest doesn't adjust for rake, but it's still fine and in a really good position. Proper grabs in the roof. It's really hard not to like this car for the amount of comfort that it offers and the amount of space that it has, and that continues in the boot. This being the Essence, it does have an electric tailgate with a one-kick function that I am not going to demonstrate on camera. Inside, MG claims 453 litres of boot space, which is actually pretty good, but I think that it's measured below this floor. This floor here being movable and in line with the backrests when they fold, but when you take this out, you've got another that much worth of space, and I think that is where the 453 litres is measured. As well as the electric boot, the Essence also gets 18-inch wheels, which the smaller Excite doesn't get, and it has this cool red light band across the back here that I think looks really quite sexy on this S5. Little pattern over here. It's actually a little face. I think this is much more handsome than the HS medium SUV that everyone keeps going on about being super sophisticated and everything, but I think this is more so visually and in the driving. Let us know what you think in the comments, but I think the S5 is way better than the ZS it replaces. The WLTP range claim for the MG S5 EV Essence, which is the top spec, spans 335 kilometres for the smaller battery version to 425 kilometres for the larger battery version. The smaller battery can take 120 kilowatts of DC charging, the larger one 150 kilowatts, with its 10 to 80% charging time for the larger battery being 28 minutes. Its recommended servicing intervals are every 12 months or 25,000 Ks, with its 5-year cap price servicing amount being $1,967.
The predecessor to this MG S5 EV was the ZS EV, and when I drove that car in 2021, it was one of the worst attuned cars I have driven in my career to Australian roads. The suspension was so underdamped, nauseatingly so. The body control was completely non-existent, and it was borderline undrivable in situations where if you happen to have the slightest amount of affinity to car sickness, that car was your kryptonite. Stay away. This car is the polar opposite. It couldn't be more different to the way the ZS EV drove, and thank you for that. It is a joy in comparison. What the S5 EV feels like is an MG4 in a small SUV body, and that's all you could ever ask for in the car, and that's exactly what you get. The feeling of the steering and the rear drive dynamics and the handling and everything is really, really similar. It doesn't feel that much taller and heavier. It just feels a little bit more finessed. It doesn't have the vertical pitching that the MG4 had on really bad roads. It's very much more composed and more level, even though around town it is still quite knobbly, and you can still feel it around our track here, like just nibbling away at the tyres on relatively small bumps. But you present this S5 EV with a country road and it absolutely smashes it. It's effortlessly capable, it rides extremely well, and even though it isn't plush, its control is so good that it just lets you enjoy the balance and the handling of this car. The steering is light and crisp, has really lovely turn-in, off straight ahead, just 2.8 turns lock to lock, but a fairly tight turning circle, so that gives it a really nice level of response. You can have it in one pedal braking mode too, which I've got it in right now, and while it isn't as insistent as in a Hyundai or a Kia, it is still pretty close. It's the best MG has done yet. The best new feature here though is the MG Pilot custom button that we went through when we went through the interior, and that is something that surprisingly you don't even really need to use. The only thing you really need to mitigate on this S5, because most of its safety systems now are actually fairly pleasant to live with and fairly unobtrusive, is the speed limit alert. It does bong quite regularly, it only does it 3 times, and it's pretty friendly when it does it, but it is still fairly insistent, especially when you're only just going over the limit and school zones and speed changes and everything. It's a little bit much. You can turn that off and you can program it into custom, and then it goes away. And the rest of the stuff is all actually pretty good. Even the lane keep assist is much, much more sophisticated and subtle than it was before. About the only area where I can criticize the S5 EV, and if it even is a criticism, is that it just isn't really that quick. It has 125 kilowatts and 250 newton meters. MG claims 0 to 100 in 8.6 seconds. And while its performance for the most part, certainly in its drivability around town, is effortlessly capable, when you are asking for everything that it has, it does feel a little bit flat-footed. There's a European version, I think it has 170 kilowatts, but its 0 to 100 claim is 6.3 seconds instead of 8.6, with the same battery size, interestingly, which is 62 kilowatt hours usable. So I'm kind of wondering why we don't get that. Maybe in the future that would be a real step up in the S5 EV, because it has the steering, the grip, the balance, the dynamics, and the ride composure to be able to handle all of that power. In terms of the charging as well, 150 kilowatts DC, 10 to 80% in 28 minutes. It does it. It's effortless and easy. The WLTP claim for this car is 425 kilometres, and while that isn't heaps, it's still reasonably efficient. So when you're driving around town, it doesn't get too far below that. We're into the mid 350s. It's roughly about what the same the MG4 is, i.e. not the best in its class for efficiency, but certainly nothing to be ashamed of. That said, a step beyond that 425 would probably be really appreciated for Australian buyers.
So what do I think could make the MG S5 EV a better car? I think it's the European engine tune. Why Australia doesn't get the 170 kilowatts with more range and significantly more performance is a little bit baffling, but what we have here isn't slow and isn't too bad. It's not as fast as the MG4, but it's a better all-round car dynamically than the car that it's based on. And in terms of its overall ability, this is the best car MG has made so far, at least in my opinion. Let us know what you think. It's hard to argue against the warranty, against the comfort inside, against the equipment, against the top spec being 47,990 drive away. This small battery one here is 42,990 drive away. You get so much car and quality and really quite a lot of driving character for that kind of money. And that is highly unusual, especially considering where we're coming from with this car's predecessor, especially considering some of the other cars that MG still makes, like the new HS, that are really disappointingly mediocre. That is not something you could ever say about the MG S5 EV. Let us know what you think. Would you consider a small rear drive wagon, albeit an electric one? What do you think about MG's electric cars? Have you ever owned a ZS EV, and am I just being too cruel about that car? Or let us know what you think about chasing cars. I'm Nathan Ponchard. Thanks for watching.